A Florida osteopathic doctor in a popular vacation town is under investigation for an egregious error that cost this man his life. The doctor is accused of removing the patient's wrong organ. And records show this isn't the first time that he's made a serious medical mistake. Tonight, we're hearing from the patient's widow in this First Coast News investigation.
I'm an RN with been in the medical field working full time since 1979. So if this could happen to me, it can happen to anybody.
It's been almost 3 months since Beverly Bryan lost her husband of 33 years, Bill Bryan. And she still has so many questions.
Certainly the first question is, how could any surgeon make such a grievous, impossible error?
Days after the 70-year-old, a Navy veteran, died on the operating table, she found out the doctor had removed his liver instead of his spleen.
It's just been a nightmare. It's just been a nightmare.
The Alabama couple was visiting the Destin area in August when her husband got a pain in his side. She took him to the emergency room at Ascension Sacred Heart Emerald Coast in Miramar Beach.
Had a CAT scan and they told us he had a mass on his liver, on his spleen.
He was admitted to the hospital where she says Dr. Thomas Shaknovsky told them her husband needed surgery.
I told him that we didn't want to have surgery in Florida, that we wanted to go home, and then he said, well, you can't make it home with him, he'll bleed to death.
She searched for information online about the surgeon.
And I didn't find anything bad about him. As a matter of fact, his reviews were all wonderful, which I've been told since then. His reviews and websites had been scrubbed of bad reviews.
With worsening pain, she says her husband decided to have his spleen removed at the hospital. That was the last time she saw him alive.
Shaknovsky came out and told us that he had had a splenic aneurysm that had ruptured, and that's what had caused him to bleed to death, and that his spleen was enlarged. It was 4 times the normal size.
It wasn't until he had an autopsy that she learned what had really happened.
Spleen was intact, completely intact. It had a small cyst that had ruptured, but his liver was completely gone. I just couldn't believe it.
That's because a spleen and a liver are different consistencies, different colors, and are on opposite sides of the body. A month after her husband's death, the Florida Surgeon General ordered the emergency suspension of Dr. Shaknovsky's osteopathic physician's license.
I want to see his license actually revoked in Florida.
The order says he presents an immediate serious danger to the health, welfare, and safety of the public, citing egregious surgical errors and egregious conduct of fabricating medical records. This 20-page report spells out a history of problems. In May 2023, it says Dr. Shaknovsky removed a portion of a man's pancreas instead of his adrenal gland at that same hospital, and claimed the adrenal gland had migrated to a different part of the body. Florida insurance regulation records show the patient suffered permanent injuries. The case was settled for $400,000.
I wish I had known, of course, and I wish that was public record somewhere, which it probably is, but the extensive amount of research that you have to do to find those records are kind of really cumbersome, and wouldn't be something that the average person would know.
The Florida Health Department's public database lists disciplinary records for osteopaths and medical doctors, but that only becomes public information after a complaint is filed and the board takes action.
But 9 times out of 10, they settle.
Attorney Joe Zauser, who represents Bill's widow, says oftentimes when a lawsuit is settled, no complaint is ever filed.
Many times there's a non-disparagement clause, which says you're not going to say anything bad about the other physician. In fact, the settlement with this Shaknovsky has a confidentiality agreement and a non-disparagement clause.
According to this Agency for Healthcare Administration report, in August 2023, another patient operated on by Dr. Shaknovsky at the same hospital died from infection complications following a surgery to remove part of the colon. The report says the hospital identified 3 surgical errors, all involving the same surgeon in a 15-month period. And 6 hospital workers expressed concerns about Dr. Shaknovsky's surgical practices to the operating room manager, but no further action was initiated. Could Mr. Bryan's death have been prevented?
I think on all levels, yes. I've had 400 calls about Dr. Shagnovsky's care prior to Mr. Bryan.
The hospital declined our request for an interview, but sent us a statement saying Dr. Shagnovsky has never been a Sacred Heart Emerald Coast employee and no longer practices medicine at Sacred Heart Emerald Coast or any of our facilities.
One layer of reform would be hospitals should have more responsibility for the physicians they put in their hospitals. They shouldn't be able to hide behind the independent contractor status.
While the Walton County Sheriff's Office investigates what happened to Bill Bryan to determine if there was any criminal wrongdoing, Beverly and her attorney plan to sue and take this case to trial. And she wants to see Dr. Shagnovsky criminally prosecuted.
Much more interested in being sure that this doesn't happen to anyone else. You know, that he is not just suspended from practicing medicine, but is actually his license is revoked.
Now, a month after Florida suspended his medical license, Alabama, where he is also licensed, followed suit. We reached out to Dr. Shagnovsky and his attorney. His attorney told me due to the pending nature of legal proceedings, no statements or interviews will be given at this time. The Florida Board of Osteopathic Medicine will ultimately decide if his license is revoked here in Florida. And to see how you can check to see if a doctor has any discipline on file, look for a link in this story on firstcoastnews.com.